The morning I found the receipt, I was looking for a pen. That's the thing about discovering your life is a lie. It never happens the way you imagine. No dramatic confrontation. No slow-motion revelation with violins in the background. I was rummaging through the drawer of Derek's nightstand, looking for a pen to sign a birthday card for my coworker, and my fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper tucked underneath his charging cable. Hotel Marchmont. November 14th. Room 412. 2 nights. I stood there in our bedroom in my pajamas, holding that receipt, and I counted backward in my head. November 14th. That was the weekend Derek said he was in Columbus for the regional sales conference. I remembered because I'd made a big pot of chicken soup that Friday and eaten it alone for 3 days. I remembered because I'd texted him a photo of our dog, Biscuit, sleeping on his side of the bed, and Derek had replied with a laughing emoji and nothing else. Hotel Marchmont isn't in Columbus. Hotel Marchmont is 40 minutes from our house, right off the highway on Route 9. I folded the receipt exactly the way I'd found it, tucked it back under the charging cable, went downstairs and finished my coffee. Then I sat at the kitchen table and did not move for a very long time. My name is Vivienne. Wait. No, I've always stumbled over introductions. My mother used to say I apologized before I even entered a room. My name is Lee. Lee Calloway, though I hadn't been Calloway for 9 years. I was Lee Morrow now, which had once felt like the most solid, permanent thing about me. I was 36 years old. I taught 4th grade at Birchwood Elementary in Hartsfield, Connecticut. I had a 7-year-old dog named Biscuit and a perennial garden I'd planted from seed, and a marriage I was apparently the last person to know was ending. Derek and I had met at a 4th of July party at a mutual friend's house. He was holding a red cup and laughing at something, and I thought he had the best laugh I'd ever heard. This full, unself-conscious sound, like he had nothing to hide. 9 years later, I understand the irony of that completely. I didn't confront him that morning. I didn't confront him that week. I need you to understand. I'm not someone who avoids conflict out of fear. I'm someone who needs to be certain before I speak. I spent 10 days watching him, paying attention in a way I probably should have been paying attention for years. I noticed the way his phone screen always tilted away from me when he was on the couch. I noticed he'd started keeping his car locked in our own driveway. I noticed that on 3 separate evenings he said he was running to the gym and came home without a single drop of sweat on him. On the 11th day, I called my best friend, Renata. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does. "Tell me I'm not crazy," I said. "You're not crazy," she said, before I'd even explained anything. That's the kind of friend Renata is. I told her about the receipt, about the gym bag that never smelled like a gym, about the way Derek had started buying new shirts, nicer ones, the kind with buttons, and hanging them in the back of his closet like he was saving them for something. "Lay," she said quietly, "how long have you suspected?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Longer than I want to admit," I said. She told me to be careful, told me to document what I could. She had a friend who'd gone through something similar, and the friend had walked into her lawyer's office with nothing but her own word, and walked out with half of what she deserved. "Paper trails matter," Renata said. "Don't let him control the narrative." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark next to Derek, listening to him breathe, thinking about how strange the human body is, how it can lie next to someone it's betraying and sleep just fine. 3 days later, I found out her name. It wasn't hard. His phone was on the counter while he was in the shower, and it lit up with a text that said, "Can't stop thinking about last night." The contact name was just K. But I'd seen that same contact name pop up before and dismissed it as a work colleague. Kevin Kyle. I'd been giving him the benefit of the doubt for so long it had become a reflex. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone. Then I put his phone back exactly where it had been. Her name, as I later found out through a combination of his email and a canceled check I found in the recycling bin, was Kristen. She worked with him at the distribution company, where Derek managed regional accounts. She was 29 years old. She had a LinkedIn profile with a headshot where she was smiling in a blazer, and I stared at that photo for probably 10 minutes wondering what kind of person knowingly gets involved with a married man and then sends heart emojis at 8 in the morning. I kept teaching my 4th graders long division. I kept watering my garden. I kept making dinners Derek ate across from me while talking about traffic and office politics and what he wanted to watch after dinner. And the whole time I was thinking clearly, more clearly, maybe, than I'd thought in years. I called a divorce attorney named Pamela Ossie. A friend from grad school had used her and described her as The kind of person you want in your corner when everything's on fire. Pamela had short natural hair and red glasses on a beaded chain, and she did not waste a single word. We met at her office on a Tuesday afternoon, and I laid everything out: the receipt, the canceled check, the photo of the text message, a log I'd been keeping in a notes app on my phone. She looked at everything carefully. Then she looked at me. Connecticut is a no-fault divorce state, she said, but evidence of marital misconduct can still affect asset division, depending on circumstances. How are the finances structured? I'd thought about this. I was the one who did our taxes. I knew exactly what we had. We owned our house together, purchased 7 years ago for $340,000 with both our names on the deed. Derek had a 401(n) through his company. I had a pension through the school district and a savings account I'd kept in my name since before we married, which Pamela told me would likely be considered separate property. We had a joint checking account and a joint brokerage account Derek had opened 2 years ago to start investing, and which, I'd recently noticed, had dropped significantly from its original balance. He's been withdrawing from the brokerage account, I said. $15,000 over the past 8 months. Pamela took off her glasses and let them hang on the chain. She looked at me steadily. Then we're going to want to move carefully, she said, and quickly, she explained the process. I listened and took notes in a small spiral notebook. I felt, for the first time in weeks, like I was doing something. Like I had some control back. I told Derek I wanted a divorce on a Thursday evening in March. He'd just poured himself a glass of water and was standing at the kitchen counter. And I said it the same way I'd say we need to get more dish soap. Calm and direct. I watched his face go through about 4 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. What? He said. I want a divorce, Derek. I know about Kristen. I know about the hotel. I know about the money. The glass went down on the counter harder than he intended. Biscuit, who was sleeping by the back door, lifted his head and looked at us. Lay. I've already spoken with an attorney, I said. You'll receive the paperwork next week. He tried, in the following hour, to do all the things people do when they're caught. He apologized. He said it was a mistake. He said it had only been going on for 4 months, which I didn't believe, and also didn't particularly care about. He cried. Actual tears, which surprised me, though I'm not sure why. And then, when he understood that none of it was working, he got quiet and a little cold, and I recognized that version of him too. That was the version that showed up whenever he felt like he was losing. You can't just blow up our entire life, he said. I didn't blow it up, I said. You did. I slept in the guest room that night. I lay on the narrow bed with Biscuit curled against my legs, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought, okay, just that. Okay. The following 6 weeks were the hardest of my adult life. I want to be honest about that. There's a version of this story where I glide through the dissolution of my marriage with my head held high, serene, and unbroken. That's not what happened. What happened is that I cried in my car, in the school parking lot, 3 separate times. What happened is I lost 8 pounds because I kept forgetting to eat. What happened is that some nights the anger was so hot and physical that I had to go outside and stand in the backyard in the cold, in my socks, just to feel something other than it. Derek moved out in April and into an apartment 20 minutes away. I don't know if Kristen moved in with him. I didn't ask, and I didn't look. My mother came up from North Carolina to stay with me for 2 weeks, which was both a comfort and its own particular challenge. My mother's name is Beverly, and she means well, and she also had a lot of opinions about what I should have done differently, which I had to absorb in small doses. My father called every Sunday and just talked about his tomato plants, about a book he was reading, about nothing in particular. And I want to say that those phone calls kept me more grounded than almost anything else. He never once told me what to do. He just made sure I knew he was there. The legal process moved faster than I expected, mostly because Derek's attorney was apparently advising him to settle quickly and avoid a drawn-out fight. Pamela suspected it was because of the brokerage account withdrawals. He didn't want a forensic accountant looking too closely at where that money had gone. We settled in late May. I kept the house. We split the brokerage account and his 401(n) down the middle, with an adjustment in my favor given the financial dissipation. He kept his car. I got the dog by his own admission. He said he'd never really bonded with Biscuit, which told me more about Derek than anything else ever had. The morning the divorce was finalized, I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee and I let myself feel the full weight of it. 9 years. A third of my life. The good parts had been real. I believed that. The weekend trips to Vermont, the stupid in-jokes, the way he used to bring me tea when I was grading papers late at night. Those things had been real. They just hadn't been enough for him to protect. I let myself grieve that for exactly one morning. Then I went inside and I started making a list. The list was practical. Fix the leaking faucet in the upstairs bathroom. Refinance the mortgage in my name alone. Figure out the back garden, which had gotten overgrown during the months I'd been distracted. Call Renata. Call my dad. Maybe, eventually, figure out what came next. Renata came over that Saturday with wine and takeout from the Thai place I liked, and we sat on the kitchen floor, which is where we've always sat when things were serious. It started in college, and neither of us has ever questioned it. She told me about a friend of a friend who'd gone through a divorce and had started volunteering at an animal rescue shelter and had genuinely turned her life around. I'm not saying you need a project, Renata said carefully. I know, I said, but maybe I do. I'd started running in the mornings. Not because I'd always wanted to be a runner, but because I needed something physical to do with the feelings, and running turned out to be cheaper than a punching bag. I started slow. 30 minutes, mostly walking, on the trail that ran along the river behind our neighborhood. By July, I was doing 45 minutes without stopping. That's where I met Oliver. He was sitting on a bench at the halfway point of the trail, trying to convince his border collie mix to drink from a collapsible water bowl. The dog was doing that stubborn nose-away thing that dogs do when they've decided they're not interested. I laughed before I could stop myself, and Oliver looked up. She's making a point, he said. I don't fully understand what point, but she's committed to it. The dog's name was Tuesday. Oliver told me this like it was completely normal. He was 41, I would later learn, with gray at his temples and laugh lines that had been there a while. He was a middle school science teacher. He'd grown up in Vermont and moved to Connecticut 8 years ago for a woman who had then, in his words, very reasonably decided I wasn't what she was looking for. He said it without self-pity, which I appreciated. We talked for maybe 20 minutes that first time. He was easy to talk to in a way that felt unfamiliar, and I drove home afterward, wondering if I'd forgotten how to recognize normal kindness. If years of being with someone who was always slightly withheld had recalibrated my expectations downward without my noticing. I didn't want to fall for someone new. I want to be honest about that too. It wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to be standing on my own feet, rebuilding my own life, finding out who Lee Calloway, Lee Morrow, Lee whoever she was now actually was when she wasn't organized around another person's needs. But Oliver was patient. We ran into each other on the trail again the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. He always had Tuesday with him. We got coffee once, just as friends, at the place near the trailhead, and he told me about a student who had cried in his classroom that week, and how he'd sat with her for 20 minutes after the bell, and done basically nothing useful except be there. And something about the way he told that story, matter of fact, without trying to make himself the hero of it, stayed with me for the rest of the day. I told Renata about him in September. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, Lay, is he kind to you? Yes, I said. Okay, she said. That's the whole thing. That's the only question. I want to tell you what happened with Derek, because I think it matters. I heard through a former mutual friend sometime around September that he and Kristen had broken up. Apparently, it hadn't lasted past the summer, which, I'll admit, I sat with for a moment before deciding I didn't actually feel as satisfied as I'd expected to. Mostly, I just felt tired on his behalf. He'd burned everything down for something that lasted like 6 months. He called me once, in October. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail that was long and muddled and contained the phrase, I've been doing a lot of thinking more than once. He didn't say he wanted to reconcile, at least not directly. But I could hear it underneath his words, that old familiar pull toward having something back that you'd thrown away. I listened to the voicemail once, then I deleted it. Biscuit was asleep at my feet when I did it, and I reached down and scratched behind his ears, and he made the small satisfied sound he always makes. And I thought, this is enough. Not forever. I wasn't making promises to myself about forever. But for right now, in this room, in this house that was mine now, this was enough. The holidays were quieter than I expected, which is to say they were quiet in a way that felt chosen rather than imposed. My mother and father drove up from North Carolina, and we had Thanksgiving at my house for the first time ever. I'd always deferred to Derek's family before. My mother and I made pie together at 7 in the morning and argued cheerfully about crust technique. and my dad sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, and Biscuit ate a small piece of turkey he absolutely was not supposed to have. Oliver came to Christmas Eve dinner, which my father treated with a warmth so genuine and immediate that I had to look out the window for a moment to compose myself. Oliver brought a bottle of good wine and a dog toy for Biscuit and shook my father's hand and said, "It's really good to finally meet you, sir." And my dad said, "Call me Frank." And by the time we sat down to eat, they were talking about tomato cultivation, like they'd known each other for years. I didn't know yet what Oliver and I were becoming. I knew that it was slow and careful and real. I knew that he never made me feel small. I knew that when I was anxious, about the refinancing, about a difficult student, about the ordinary anxieties of a life being rebuilt, he didn't try to solve it immediately or redirect me to something easier. He just listened, and sometimes he said, "That sounds really hard." And somehow that was usually exactly right. Spring came back around. My perennial garden came up on its own, the way perennials do. Without being replanted or reminded, just rising again out of the same ground, because that's what they're designed to do. On a Saturday in April, exactly 1 year after Derek had moved out, I stood in my backyard with a trowel and a flat of new salvia plants, and I thought about everything that had happened inside the four walls behind me. The marriage, the finding, the ending, the long months of putting myself back together, piece by careful piece. The morning runs and the phone calls with my dad, and the Saturday nights on the kitchen floor with Renata. The first time Tuesday had fallen asleep in my lap, which Oliver had photographed with such quiet delight that I'd laughed out loud. I thought about the woman who had stood in the bedroom holding a hotel receipt and felt her entire footing shift beneath her. I planted the salvia in a long row along the south fence. I worked slowly and without rushing. The sun was warm on the back of my neck. Biscuit snored in the grass 6 feet away, and the birds in the big oak at the back of the yard were loud and insistent, the way they always are in April, like they're reminding everything alive that it came back. I pressed my hands into the soil, and I thought, I came back too. Not back to what I was before. That person was gone, and I didn't want her back exactly. She'd been too patient with the wrong things, too willing to explain away what she saw, because seeing clearly would have cost her something. I came back as someone who knew what it felt like to lose the ground beneath her feet and discover that she could find it again. Someone who knew that kindness wasn't a small thing. Someone who knew that a person who listened, really listened, was not something to take for granted. I washed my hands at the outdoor faucet and sat down on the back step and pulled out my phone and called my dad because it was Sunday tomorrow and I didn't want to wait. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, "how's the garden?" "Coming in," I said. "Everything's coming in."